Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Today is Friday, April 22nd, 2011, and it is 12 o'clock p.m. And this interview is being held and recorded at the William K. Sanford Town Library in Albany, New York. My name is Dan Weaver, and I am part of the Town of Colonie Veterans Project. Today we are joined by Mr. Harold P Conley, Jr. He has been a town resident for over 2 decades. Mr. Conley was born in Bronx, New York on October 17, 1948. Before we begin, we would like to thank you, Mr. Conley, for your sacrifice and service on behalf of our nation. So welcome, Mr. Conley.
Thank you.
Okay, let's start with some background information. What war and branch did you serve in?
I was in the U.S. Navy. And I was a black shoe, they call black shoe, which means the old traditional Navy rates. As it turned out, I wound up being a storekeeper. So I was an E4. It's like a corporal in the other branches. The Navy's kind of unique. Along with the Coast Guard, they have petty officers and they don't have sergeants and all the rest of it. But I was never on a ship per se, but I was stationed in a lot of land bases, one of them being in Vietnam. After substantial training, I served in the Navy from April 14th of 66 until October 10th of 69. And I was in Vietnam specifically from the 13th of September of 67 till the 13th of September of 68. Friday the 13th, I just remember, happened to be Friday the 13th. And one of the things that we were always concerned with was for propaganda and morale purposes, they'd always try to blow up the plane just as you finish your tour, kind of a psychological warfare thing, as well as a physical warfare that the Vietnamese, North Vietnamese Army and the Viet Cong would carry out. I was there during the Tet Offensive, the first major big Tet Offensive occurred on February 1st of 68, which was pretty heavy and serious situation over there. They blew up the air base, which was in Da Nang. So. Anyway, that's...
Okay. What unit were you assigned to?
I was at the NSA Da Nang, Naval Support Activity. So I was not out in the field, and I was working mostly in logistics. I had Vietnamese working with me. I kind of still know quite a bit of Vietnamese. I can speak the lingo. And worked at night, which was interesting. A lot of rockets and mortar attacks would occur because they were trying to blow up an ammo dump, which was right next to where all of our storage areas were. We were basically moving material in for other units, inter branches of Air Force, Army, whoever was there, especially Marines. And that's basically what I experienced while I was there. Was the mortar attacks, the Tet Offensive, and working with the Vietnamese. We had Koreans there too with us. We had Korean volunteers who were civilians who helped. And we also had ROK Marines, Republic of Korea Marines, based closely nearby to where we were in this large area. Then after that, when I came back from Vietnam, I wound up in a beach jumper unit, which I had no idea what this was. Nobody in the Navy seemed to understand what it was. And it was actually classified. If you see the website, they have a website. It was actually classified until the late 90s. And even when I was with them, there's certain things I didn't need to know they did not share, even though I had a secret clearance, top secret clearance. What they did was electronic warfare. The symbol is a mask with the number 1 behind it, like the comedy tragedy mask. One of them, Beach Jumper Unit 1, with a 1 behind this mask. And what they did was they went into Vietnam. They were jumpers and divers and SEALs, and I was stationed with these guys. I had to go through some of their training. And before I had went to Vietnam, I was at this same base, a Naval Amphibious Base in Coronado, California, right in Southern California, outside of San Diego, very close to Mexico. And it was an experience to be stationed with these fellows. And there were no women in the unit, by the way, not back then. There were women in the Navy, but not in this unit. It was part of the Naval Special Warfare Group. And I had made a rank while I was there, so I became basically their accountant. So I had to get their budgets and supplies and so on and so forth. Plus I had to go through their training too, which was a trip.
Now, how intense was that training?
Pretty intense. Pretty intense. You had to slide down a rope, slide for life. And I fell off the thing because I tried to go down like a monkey. I didn't listen to them because I used to be a gymnast when I was a kid. And I thought I knew better than that. Not really. I got a little bit down and I fell onto the sand and my knee hit my chin. And my lip was bleeding and I had to climb over this other huge, you don't say rope in the Navy, line. You know, when they go over the side of a ship, they got these like rope lines. It looks like a tic-tac-toe type of thing. Very big one. I had to go over this thing, and I got over it and got onto the other side. And I said, "That's all right." They said, "You're all right," because I was bleeding from falling off the slide for life. And they figured, "Hey, you got over the wall. That's enough right there." The rest of it, I made it through it, the obstacle course. Before Vietnam, I went through some very serious training that SEALs do go through. Okay, I was not as good a swimmer to be a SEAL. They spot you in boot camp if you can, really. They do a trick in boot camp, which I figured out later because I remembered when I was just 17. I had dropped out of school, actually. I don't suggest that to anybody else, especially you being a teacher. But I dropped out of high school in the Bronx with the agreement that I could get my GED and my equivalency diploma later. So I actually outsmarted them because if I would have stayed in school being such a not model school kid, I would have been in school in high school till I was 19. But I had the GED in the bag by the time I was 17.
Right.
Because I went in when I was 17 and a half. I passed the test. I did good on the test. So New York had the toughest criteria to pass the GED to get the equivalency, and fortunately, I was able to do well, and I had that knocked out of the way. The recruiter was pretty good. He made me do that. But to get back to the training, I know you're focusing on the training. After my first tour of duty after boot camp, which was, I went in April. I got out of boot camp and was home on like a 2-week leave or maybe 30-day leave. I think it was a 2-week leave. And then I was stationed in Washington, D.C. at Andrews Air Force Base, which was good duty. And so while I was there, I had gotten into some fights with some people and so forth. I was not, again, I'm not a model sailor by any means. And wound up being on the other side of the powers that be, and they decided to send me to Vietnam. That's how I wound up getting orders to Vietnam to begin with. And not only the orders to Vietnam, prior to going over, I had to go through some very, very difficult, top top of the line, difficult training that I never volunteered for. Most have to volunteer for this. So I went through something called SERE, S-E-R-E, Survival, Escape, Resistance, and Evasion. And this was a simulated POW camp where you had to sleep there for a week in lean-tos that were made out of parachutes. You couldn't have any food with you. They still allowed you to smoke, even though that was probably the worst thing they could have allowed, as we know now. And they said this is not the time to quit smoking, as a matter of fact. So they left us out there, and they taught us how to survive in a jungle-like situation. This was a pilot survival school as well as a SERE training. It was an Air Force thing called at a place called Whidbey Island. So anyway, I found myself in this problem, as they called it. You're in the problem. So while I was in this problem, they interrogate you, they humiliate you, they physically smack you around, they broke one guy's rib, they broke another guy's wrist, they crucified one guy with ropes in the camp. They tried to train you how to deal with the enemy if you're captured, and what to sign and what not to sign, and how to speak. And you can only say your name, your rank, your service number, and date of birth. That's it. They ask you always, okay, so they ask you, who's your commanding officer? You can't say anything, and then they torture you when you don't tell them, see? Part of the regimen of this was they put us in a little boxes where you had to crunch up like a fetal position almost. You could, fortunately I was a gymnast, I could fit into this little box. And it was like 4 of us went into these boxes, and they put a hasp on it, and they shoved, I guess, a stick or a screwdriver or something through it, and they left you in there for an unbelievable amount of time. It was hot, you couldn't breathe, and I'm a little claustrophobic, and it started to get to me, but I got through it. I don't know how long I was in there. I've been asked. I thought it could have been a half hour, could have been an hour and a half. I don't even know. It was just miserable and terrible. I got through it by praying and counting and anything else I could think of. Then after that, you've heard the term lately. I never even knew what this was called. I used to say they drowned me while I was laying down. They drowned me while I was laying down. It's waterboarding. It's the thing that they've exposed with this whole Arab business, with this current problem, this war. And if you remember, right at 9/11, there was one guy that really looked messed up, some Arab Muslim fundamental lunatic who was involved in the plane conspiracy. Well, they did a number on him. They waterboarded him something like 90 times or something. You could see he looked like, he looked too, it kind of does you, it does you in mentally. It's like they can kill you, So anyway, they did it to me, I'd say 5, 7, 10 times, I don't know. They just kept pouring water down your nose from your own canteen or cup. Well, they took this away from us. It was their canteen at this point. They did this throughout the week, but the last day was 24 hours of being trapped. You had to give up. You couldn't. The idea was to escape once they had you in the POW camp, but it was real. I didn't escape. I found something that I could have used, and I gave it to the commanding officer. It was a spoon, which you could turn into a knife and maybe get out of there. So I just turned it in. Nobody escaped, I don't think. Anyway, so that's waterboarding. There was also like a 55-gallon drum perched on a fulcrum right above like a small gully. And it was half filled with water. The way it was set up was, you could see it had water, not half, maybe a third of it was water, and you knew you were going to be rolled over. It looked like they would just kick this thing over into the gully and you'd be rolling around in a 55-gallon drum of water, but they didn't do it. Say this was just a psychological thing. But you had to wear hoods, okay? So when I was crawling into it, they'd say, go in there. I said, sure, I didn't say sure, I just went Okay. Well,
You went with
and I went like I'm going to do. I got the hood all wet. Well, that was bad because I had to put the hood back on, and now I'm breathing. It was hot. This was in July or August in '67, and this was in Washington State, Whidbey Island, and it was quite hot. And I was, was having trouble breathing because the hood was now wet. And they noticed this when I wound up. They lead you around, you don't know where you're going. They're just stumbling along. They're holding you, pushing you, pulling you, whatever. And I had to step up, and I found myself in a small room with like pictures of Marx and Lenin on the wall. By the way, these drill instructors were dressed as Russian soldiers, Russian commandants and whatnot. And they had beer. They had these phony beer steins, like they were drinking beer, and they had us machine guns around this compound. But anyway, I wound up in there with this real big guy. They were all really drill instructors from all the branches of the service, not just the Navy. They were Marine Corps drill instructors, some were Army, I think a couple of Air Force. But anyway, so I found myself with this guy, and he's telling me I got to sign these papers. He says, "Take off hood, pig." So I took off the hood, and he says, "You got to sign the papers." So I read the papers, and I couldn't sign them because it said I bombed innocent women and children. They taught us a little bit about this as an indoctrination. They would meet with us in a log cabin, big one, in the morning. The first couple of days we were in this week-long problem thing. And so anyway, I just went, no, I shook my head. And he says, "Okay, pig, put on hood." So I put the hood on, and he noticed my gasping for air because the hood was saturated. So what this guy did was, on my exhalation, he lifted me. He's a big man. He lifted me by the hood like this, and I'm up against the wall of the back of this small room. And he also did this, put his hand over my nose and mouth at the same time as he was holding me up off the floor, all right? Meanwhile, I had just exhaled, and I'm starting to really, I felt like I was dying, And then he let me down, and he goes, "Okay, pig, take off hood." And I took off the hood, and he said to sign this thing again. So I looked at it real quick, and I didn't care what it said. I signed it, And you're supposed to do whatever you think is right if you're the only one there. If you're there with a couple of other guys being tortured at the same time, you deter to the highest rank. I was the only one there, so I did. I made it through that. They did stop in the middle of this thing, said the problem's off, which meant you didn't have to worry about it until they said the problem's back on. They took me and about 3 other guys into a room, and they said, "Listen, you guys are just making a couple of minor errors here. You're not doing it on purpose. We're not, you're doing okay." But they played back a tape of me, and they said, when you were being interrogated, listen to what the tape said. They were saying, I was saying, they were saying, "What is your name?" And I would say, "My name is Harold P Conley." "What is your rank?" "My rank is that of a non-petty officer." And then they say, "And what's your date of birth?" "I was born," they said, "See, you're saying too much. You just got to give them the name, not my rank is that of." I was too verbal. They explained, they could twist these words into some sort of statement that I didn't even make using my real vocal patterns.
Yeah.
Crazy. So then they said the problem's back on. They're back into it. And there were more tortures than that, but I've told you the biggest ones. There's a movie that you may or may not be familiar with Demi Moore that came out some time ago, and it was more realistic than you might think. It was called G.I. Jane.
Yes.
G.I. Jane. It's accurate. It's accurate, except for the fight scene when she's going through the SEER training I'm just talking about, where she beats up the Master Chief somehow, is ridiculous, okay? Nobody's going to beat up a Master Chief in that situation after you've been starved, dehydrated almost, and weakened for, you know, a period of time. And they wouldn't let that happen anyway. The other drill instructors would come in and stop it. But aside from that, that movie was very accurate. Very accurate. Anyway, that's...
Well, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, well, it's
The
true.
training.
True.
What made you decide to enter the U.S. Navy?
Well, I had a couple of goals. I wanted to finish high school as quickly as possible, and I also wanted to learn something, and a trade or something, you know. And I was, you know, for the country. I was somewhat patriotic, you know, still. And I figured the Navy's better than the Army, because my father was in the Army. My father was a very honored World War II veteran. He was wounded on Saipan, so it was kind of like a tradition there. And he told me, don't go in the Army because the food's lousy. His brother went in the Navy, and my uncle, his brother, who I met a few times, impressed me when I was a young man. He came by while he was a sailor, and he visited us, and took me to a toy store, bought me all these toys. It was really nice. He seemed like a very nice man. So I don't know, things like that. Also, my teeth, I needed some dental work at the time, which they did, and I don't know why else. That's about it.
All right. Now, given the context of the Vietnam War, where exactly did you go within
Vietnam? Basically, Da Nang. Da Nang is about as north as you could have gone, close to the DMZ, which was the demilitarized zone. Well, I was at a place called Monkey Mountain, is where we had our barracks set up. And Marble Mountain was to the south. So as north as you could go, I believe I was pretty close to as north as you could go. There may have been some more, but over that mountain was trouble. But on that mountain, we had a lot of communications set up and whatnot, and we had guards on these towers, wooden towers, where they would go up, climb up. I was up there a few times talking with some of the soldiers who were the guards, and you know, you'd hear the rock apes throwing rocks. They thought it was Vietnamese. You'd hear shots on. There was always fire going on. You know, bullets, machine guns. So it was almost, in some ways, it was better I worked at night, because that's when all the stuff would go on and I'd be awake, whereas in the daytime you didn't hear much fireworks. You know.
So it was mostly in the evening?
Huh?
It was mostly in the evening that...
Yeah, at night, when they blew up the airbase, for example, I was right there watching it. It was midnight, and the whole sky lit up. It looked like it was the afternoon, because what happened was the Viet Cong knew where the fuel supply was, jet fuel, and they hit it with rockets on the airbase, and the whole airbase was on fire. It hit 1 million gallons of jet fuel. You can imagine, right? And then these guys were coming, these Viet Cong were coming across the river after us, or to get away or whatever. And I watched as the helicopter gunships, Spooky, they call it Spooky, and another was the Jolly Green Giant, and they have all these names for these helicopters. And you would see tracers pouring out, and a tracer was like for every 10th bullet. So you knew there were 10 for every tracer, and all you saw was tracers, so you knew there was a lot of firepower going on there. And I know this historically because I read up on the history after I was out of the service. I was a veterans counselor, interviewer, you know, I was just picking up things and reading everything. And what happened was, we wiped out the Viet Cong, okay, during this Tet Offensive. We wiped them out. There was no more like local movement. There was just the North Vietnamese army after that. There was still some sympathy maybe for them, but we wiped them out. And we won 40 or 44 firefights where we were in the different locales, provinces, or what have you. However, the interesting thing about this is that because they had poor communications, they went off too early in Da Nang. We were one of two places that they hit earlier than they should have, and they tipped it off. So now the whole Vietnam where we were, everybody was on red alert. I knew they were coming.
Right.
So they took a place called Hue, H-U-E, Hue, which was the old provincial capital of Vietnam. And it took us weeks to get it back, but we got it back. All right, so they made no gains. They lost a lot of people. They were almost decimated. But ironically, that was the turning point of the war in the favor of the North Vietnamese because of propaganda more than anything else, because the people at home here didn't think they could mount even an offensive and that the war would be over in a short period. Now at this point they saw they had a big army and they could do this and they could mount an offensive in almost everywhere where we were. So even though we, all the battles we won, we never lost a battle in Vietnam, by the way. French did, but we never did. And that's that. So.
Now, what were your specific duties while you were in Vietnam? Did you have a specific job assignment?
Yeah. Like I said a little earlier, I mentioned it. While I was in Vietnam, I was like in charge of Vietnamese crew, okay, and Koreans. They kind of worked sort of for the unit I was in, which was the logistics unit, responsible for taking all the stuff that they got off of Sealand vans and loaded onto the dock, a regular truck loading dock, not a sea dock. And we would have to distribute all this stuff with codes and whatnot and load it up on trucks with forklifts and so on and so forth. So I was not the man in charge, but I really did it. I was the supervisor,
right.
Okay? All the other higher ranking folks just were sitting in the office and stuff, so I kind of really ran it with another sailor, the two of us. And we had a good rapport with the Koreans and the Vietnamese. This guy worked for me, Trung was his name. That was pretty much my mission in Vietnam. But then when I came back, I'm glad it wasn't the other way around where I had to go to Vietnam when I was a beach jumper, because then some of my shipmates from the beach jumpers are deceased. Again, on that website, I could show you, I can get into the website further than you can because I have a secret code, because there's so few of us beach jumpers. They have it by roster. They have our names and the two units. They only had 2 units during Vietnam, and my unit was the only one that went to Vietnam. The other one on the East Coast here, Beach Jumper Unit 2, did not. Anyhow, the beach jumpers were created by Douglas Fairbanks Jr., believe it or not. Because he was a Navy officer during World War II. And the first assignment they had was during the invasion of Normandy, and it is still classified what they exactly did. So I don't even know. They won't tell you. They give you ideas. We were there, as beach jumpers. And even the term SEAL was sort of, when I was with the beach jumpers, it was kind of new. And a lot of the SEALs didn't care for it. They wanted to be known as frogmen, or they call themselves UDT, Underwater Demolition Teams, UDT. And they had these like diving spheres that were dropped in various places, and they could confuse radar and trick the enemy into thinking you're going to come on the north side when you're really coming on the south side, or you're not coming at all. You know, they were very, very effective. Early on, high-tech electronic stuff was going on all over that compound. It was a locked compound. You couldn't get in there unless you were, you know, in the unit. So I think I answered your question there.
Now you mentioned something about experiencing combat. What were your feelings during that time when you were involved with the mortar and whatnot?
Well, I was always, I want to say that it didn't scare me as much as at all, but it did scare me somewhat at first. Then you kind of get used to it after a while, but you don't realize it's affecting you. Psychologically it affects you. You know, mortars going off. I do have a disorder known as PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and a lot of times I'll jump out of my skin when somebody else is totally normal. If a car backfires, even the rain sometimes with thunder, what have you. Even somebody coming up behind me sometimes worries me. You know, I've already been, you know, I've taken some martial arts courses since I've been back, and I was taught some too in Vietnam by the Koreans at Taekwondo. So I'm a purple belt, 6th degree in Taekwondo, but that's a while ago. I still can do it, but it hurts if I hit somebody, so it's not worth it, you know. But self-defense was the idea anyway, you know. Anyhow, yeah, so there's a lot of residual effects you have no idea are happening once you're out of the war zone, and once I was out of the service, it's like you're still on.
Right.
You can't shut it off. You're still like, you know, what's going to happen next? You're still concerned and a little paranoid and whatever. Ironically, the year I was over in Vietnam, this was the going joke. Wasn't a joke, but some guys went home and came back. They said, hey, if you think you're going to get welcome home, forget it. Right. You tell them, hey, I just come back from Vietnam. They say, yeah, well, I just got out of Detroit. You know, I just got out of Watts, California. While I was there, Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy Jr. were both assassinated. So
a lot has happened.
Yes. And another sort of a little bit of an upsetting situation was I served 3.5 years, and after 67 and 68, they were letting guys out, and women out, who had come in after me to save money because they saw that the war was going to be over, and Nixon had now had this plan for peace and all this other business. And so somebody would come in for a 4-year enlistment and get out in a 1.5 years, and I had done a year in Vietnam there, and I went through all this training. There's more training, I forgot to tell you too, by the way. But anyway, they said, well, because you're with it, we got to keep you. You've been trained well. You know, now these newer guys, we're just going to get rid of them. So I kind of didn't care for that because I wanted out of the Navy.
Right.
And the other training that I neglected to tell you earlier was I was trained by the Seabees, another tough group of sailors. It was before Vietnam, and I was trained at a place called Port Hueneme, California. Beautiful base, lovely ocean. Nothing was there back then. I'm sure it's built up now. It was Oxnard, California. And it was a place where you go into the town, and the hotel was called Hotel. There was a laundromat called Laundromat. There was one movie there. That was it. There was nothing else there. So it was a very small town, California, backward town, but the base was nice. Anyway, I had to learn how to drive these huge forklifts, which I wound up never doing in Vietnam. But I didn't have a driver's license. I was just a kid, 17, and I never got the license being in New York City. You had to get it at 18, or you could have got a junior license. It's not like upstate where most kids are driving by the time they're 17. You know, it was not down there. It was not. So anyhow, so that training was also quite difficult and dangerous. And I became the one they would do it to because they knew I didn't have a license. Everybody else had a license. Anybody doesn't have a license, I raised my hand. Okay, you get up on so on this big thing. The tire was taller than me, and I had to climb up, and it did everything with the forks. It would actually turn the whole thing to adjust. If you were on a hill, you could make it go like that. It was crazy. It was good, interesting.
It was on-the-job training.
Well, that was, yeah, but that was specific training. So that when I got to Vietnam, they thought I might be using these big forklifts outside, but I was never doing that. I did forklifts. I was driving forklifts and all kinds of other equipment. But that was another tough training. But not as the SEER training was really bad. A lot of people don't make it through the SEER training. They crack.
Right.
You know. And they're still doing it the same too. I found this out because of the recent publicity. They're still doing the same exact thing. Probably worse, if possible.
Right. Given the times. Now, did you sustain any injuries or illnesses while you were over there?
I didn't. I don't have any Agent Orange pathogens. Okay. Thank heavens. But what I do have is skin problems, post-traumatic stress disorder, and I have a variety of other things. But I was never shot. I don't have a Purple Heart. Thank heavens. I wasn't trying for one of those. Nobody ever does. It's a very honored award, but it's something you don't want to, qualify for if you can avoid it. I've helped people get their Purple Hearts who didn't. Who never got them. It's a very hard thing to do as a counselor afterwards. So I was no hero or anything, but I did some things that were a little above the norm. For example, while I was there, when we got hit with rockets one night, there were no officers working at night, so it was just all of us were either petty officers or seamen, enlisted men. And something got hit in our domain. Refrigerated storage banks. We knew it got hit. So somebody had to go out and check it out. And everybody who was supposed to do this, which were the higher rank and petty officers, all were afraid. It was at night, you don't know what's there. Right at the fence, there was people, they could be the enemy right outside the fence, so they're lobbing rockets right over. You don't know what. And everybody got hit with a rocket, so we had to go there. So I volunteered. I said, "Let me go." And I went, and I had my M16, and I was in the back of the truck, and I saw the guys at the refrigerated storage unit. There were two Marines. And I went over and I said who I was, who are you guys, and we're Marines and we're getting supplies, and I said, what happened? And I wrote up the report, and the guy had the actual head of the rocket, which was interesting. He says, "I'm gonna keep this as a souvenir." I says, "Yeah, you can keep that." I was into getting evidence, the guys survived it. They were right there when it got hit. So that was one thing. Then I always seemed to be close to what was going on, and I had to make some snap decisions. But that was pretty much probably the most notable thing that I did. It required some bravery, but it was not a big deal. I really admire the guys that were out there searching for them, but a lot of them really were set up bad. They didn't want us to win that war, obviously. Could have been very easily won. Right then and there when they hit us on the Tet, they had to go back home. Could have hit them all the way back. They let them go. There was no counter-offensive there was a counteroffensive, but they didn't include, going all the way back and going into Vietnam. They didn't do that. So that was a big mistake, a strategic error. They're afraid of the Russians and all that, and the Chinese.
Right.
The Chinese, by the way, after we lost the war, well, after the war was over, peace with honor, whatever you want to call it, the Chinese went in there to take advantage of their weakened situation after facing us for all those years. And you know what happened? They killed the Chinese bad. They knocked the Chinese out of commission. The Chinese had to retreat, bleeding bad, never went back. So they were tough. They knew their own. I mean, that's their place, And they had fought the Japanese in World War II. They fought the French. They defeated the French at Dien Bien Phu. I mean, they gave us a time, and then the Chinese. Even though it was such a small place, I think that you got to respect. They get some respect from me from being able to defend their own locale. Although I have no great love for them.
Right.
The people I liked. The South Vietnamese people were very, very gentle folks, and kind and pleasant. And I spoke with them, and I learned their language a little bit, and they appreciated that. And I went into the city as a guest at one of the Vietnamese houses, and I saw some interesting stuff. There was somebody there didn't like that I was there, or some guy was running around, and the other guy said, "Don't worry about it," And I was not armed, so I was concerned, whatever.
Well, can you tell me about your specific unit? Did you have any type of relationship with your fellow soldiers or your commanding officers?
Yes. Not being a soldier, they call sailors shipmates. My shipmates. Yeah, I had a real good friend when I was in Vietnam. His name was Rich. His last name was Rich, George Rich. And he was from LA, and we just were fast friends right away. And he came down all of a sudden with hepatitis, and I had no idea because he was in a different barracks. And he sent me a photo of himself on the hospital ship, the Repose, making a muscle like he's recovering. And he had hepatitis, and he didn't know how he got it or anything. And he was my best friend while I was over there. And he left before I did from Vietnam, and I lent him $100. He asked me, and I lent him $100, and he paid me back. And when I was stationed in California at San Diego, he invited me to LA. Came and picked me up from San Diego, and drove me out to show me Beverly Hills and all this stuff, because he was out of the service. I was still stuck in there, and I often wonder how he is. I haven't found him since. But I had another friend who, while I was there, was in the Air Force, okay? Now this guy, his name was Butch, Bombacino, Butch. We grew up together in the Bronx, and his sister happened to be my first girlfriend when we were teenagers, okay? So him and I were really, really good friends because we were both gymnasts, and we were in high school. We were gym leaders. We were able to go to the gym during our study periods instead of being in the study hall, and we also helped out with the testing for physical fitness and all of this. So we had high bars and lots in our neighborhood. We used to do stunts in the woods. So we were very good friends. When he was in the Air Force, he joined the Air Force while I was already in the Navy, and we were corresponding. And he told me he was coming over to Vietnam, and he thought he might get into Da Nang, and he's going to try to come and see me. And sure enough, he found me in the logistics area in the daytime before I was working nights. At first I was working days, but most of it was nights. But then, and we went around, we hung out, we had a good time. He took me to his chow hall in the Air Force. I took him to the Navy chow hall, and we took some photos, which I was looking for, which I couldn't find. And he was at the air base during Tet. He was only in Vietnam for a month. So they call it temporary duty. He was from the Philippines, stationed in the Philippines, but he was a technician. And he was in a Phantom jet doing whatever they do, technical work, while the base got blown up that night of February 1st, okay? And he got stuck. He was a real skinny guy. You had to be skinny to be able to fit into these planes like that. And he was stuck in there while the base is on fire. And I thought he was dead because I knew he was there, and I knew he was working nights. Okay, and I didn't see him anymore after that until he wrote me when he got back to the Philippines, because it was only for 1 month, what had happened, that he was okay. And he didn't even tell me that whole story till many years later. I just visited him. We've always kept in contact after the service, from the 70s on, you know, here and there. And of late, he's living in Georgia now. He's married, he's down in Georgia, he's had 2 kids. I've had 2 kids. And he invited me there. He told me what had happened. And I was able to, because I was a Veterans Counsel, I was able to help him win a claim because he had serious PTSD. Serious PTSD. Imagine you're stuck in something and the place is on fire and you can't get out. But he was able to somehow get out of there and get to safety, get away from the fires. They put out the fires, I guess, pretty well. The base was still there, but they did a number on it by hitting that fuel dump. So anyway, he was there when I was there too. So it was nice to have an old friend from the neighborhood. And I just visited him last year down in Georgia. He lives in a place called Ellijay, Georgia. And it was good to see him.
Now, do you recall any particularly humorous or inspiring things during your time of your service? Anything?
Inspiring or humorous? Yes. Humorous, right away, when I left for boot camp, I had to take the train to the Great Lakes from Penn Station. So after they processed us at Fort Hamilton, which is in Brooklyn, I had to take a train. And there was about, 60 guys. And we're on this train, very nice train, sleeper. You know, you could sleep in it, but we didn't have to sleep. It wasn't an overnight run or anything. It was just to the Great Lakes. So I'm sitting there on the train, and I got my room, a little room and everything. And there's one guy, we picked up all these guys from Ohio, a whole ton of people from Ohio, which wound up being my boot camp company. Was like, they were all from Ohio except for 6 of us. All the New York guys wound up in another company, and I somehow just wound up with all these guys. But anyway, the one guy, he had one of those voices you can't help but hear, a booming voice, and he was kind of a jerk. And everybody was kidding around with him, and he's acting silly. And at this time, they had a product for helping you tan called Man Tan. Man Tan. Use Man Tan and get those women chasing you, you know? So he had this Man Tan, and he sprayed his whole head and his body with it, and his hair turned orange from it. So ever after that, this guy wound up in my company. They called him Man Tan. There goes Man Tan again. So that was the first and funny, probably one of the funniest things I experienced the whole time, you know? Inspiring, I would have to, let me think about that for a moment. Inspiring. Well, I would have to say, even though we didn't pursue it properly, I mean, I was all of like not even a corporal, so well, they're not going to listen to me. But getting through Tet and the way that our troops took back Way after it had been captured, and the fact that we won every battle, that was inspiring to me. That was inspiring to me. Wasn't so much a one-time inspirational thing, but when looking back, that was pretty much a moving feeling that yes, we counted, you know, we did right. We, as you know, you can't help but realize when we first came back, we all suffered greatly at the dislike of the public. We were considered, you know, baby killers and all that stuff. And nothing could be further than the truth. A lot of times we were killed because we were kind to them. They're giving them chewing gum and they blow you up, you know. So anyway, that's.
Now, can you tell me a little bit about some of the medals you received and commendations?
All right, some of these medals. Well, some of these medals are state medals. I got this Medal for Merit and this other Conspicuous Service Star. These are not the highest medals that New York State gives, but these are the second highest, and that's the third one. They only give the three as far as I know. The big one is the Conspicuous Service Cross. My father qualified for that because he had a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star. So I don't really have any super medal, but these are good. These are good. They mean that I served, you know, they're combat related, but these are state medals. These are this is the Vietnamese, that's issued by the Republic of Vietnam, which no longer exists. They call that the campaign medal. And this is the National Defense Service Medal. Everybody gets that who goes in during a period of war. Right now, the Gulf War vets, they get that just for joining, even if they don't go over, because there's a period of war. This is the Vietnam Service Medal. And that's why I have these devices, because I qualified. These are also the federal ribbons that go with those medals. And I should have a bronze device on there. That's the Navy Commendation ribbon. And this one is actually more than that, too, because I have 7 awards counting the ribbon. What they do is they don't give you medal after medal. They just give you little devices to signify that you get the same thing again and again. And so I have overall 7 campaigns in Vietnam, which count when I was a beach jumper, even though I didn't go back. The fact that it was being, you know, that the unit went and did things, I still got some credit for that, being in support of it. And this one here is probably the best looking one. That's, again, a Vietnamese medal issued by the Republic of Vietnam, which no longer exists. So these two are from the Vietnamese. These two are from Uncle Sam. And all of these reflect, these ribbons here reflect this, except I don't have that one in there. So I would have 5 in the, see, there's the ribbon there. I don't want to take it out of there. And I don't have the proper attachment anyway, so I have these here. I wear these because, especially when I used to be a counselor, I would wear these. People would ask about them, and I'd say, well, these are state medals based on your federal awards, and then I could look at their papers and order them from Division of Military and Naval Affairs, these particular medals, or the Conspicuous Service Cross, which is the highest. If you get the highest one, I don't think you can get these other 2. That's how it was back when I had to retire. These are just your typical dog tags. And you always tape them together so they don't make noise.
Now, based upon your service, what experience left the greatest impression on you?
What experience left the greatest impression on me? After Tet in Vietnam, the bodies of the dead Viet Cong were piled into a pile, a heap, and they looked like kids. I mean, young kids. They looked like 9, 10-year-old kids. And I came to the realization that we were all teenagers. I was 18 when I first got there, 19. Most of the guys there were 19 or so. The officers were a little older, you know, some exceptions, but the average age for us was 19. And I realized, before I knew all these statistics and stuff, I said, this is a war of teenagers beating up kids. They're kids and we're teenagers. This is wrong. And the only thing that I had ever seen anything like it was what I had understood about World War II in the 50s from newspapers, like with the Holocaust. Bodies piled up in graves. So I was very disheartened. But that left an image. One guy went around taking pictures of it, photos of it, and showed it to me. I don't want to see this. You know, I've seen it for real. And the stench was horrid. And they just left it there as a warning, I guess, or as to show what happens if you consort with the enemy. So I don't know. That was a very graphic image that I still drum up once in a while. I don't drum it up, it comes to me. It's a repeating thought. And that is a negative image. What was the question again? I thought there was a positive answer to it as well.
What's the greatest impression?
Greatest impression?
Based upon your service?
Yeah, well, the greatest impression was really sadness, horror over that sort of thing. And our guys, too, getting, you know, shot up young men. I saw some of that. Well, they told us if we wanted to complain about working hard, we had to work hard. We had to work, you know, 16 days before you get a day off, and you had to work like over 12 hours a day. And it was at night, so you're all crazy. You know, your body's all thrown out of whack with your rhythms. Your circadian rhythms are all thrown. I didn't eat hardly anything. I mean, I must have been 130 pounds when I came back. And I don't know what else to say. That's.
Now, do you recall the day your service ended?
Yes. October 10th, 69. They gave me a 6-day early out, because it was supposed to be the 16th. And I remember because they gave me something. I should have brought it. It's the same image as that. It's like it was like a book holder, you know, a bookend, and it had the Beach Jumper Unit logo on it, and it had my name and the dates, the year that I served with them, which is just slightly under a year, October to October of 68 to 69, and a friend of mine, this guy Jim Cherry, was a yeoman, which means a guy in the office that does all the paperwork for them, you know, gets everybody's papers right and all this. So I was storekeeper, I was more budget oriented. We were pretty good friends, and he got out the same day. So we went to the airport together and hopped on a plane in San Diego and had to switch over, I think, in LA. Stopped at O'Hare. We had a few drinks on the plane, and Yeah, that was it. I remember getting out. You don't forget getting out. It was like a big burden lifting, because you were constantly being challenged at every turn by having to do something, or this guy doesn't like you and he's higher ranked than you, or you did something wrong, you didn't mean it. A lot of times you get into trouble for stuff you really have no control over. They make the mistake and they punish you for it. So it's a very dubious situation to be in. They have something called the Uniform Code of Military Justice. It's different than what we have as civilians. And they got everything under the sun in there to nail you if you're disrespecting a superior officer, this, that, and the other thing, whatever. And then it says Article 34. Article 34 basically states, this is the general article. If we missed anything in any of these other articles, we're going to get you with this Article 34. So you're dead. There's no, there's no, appealing or anything. It's
Right.
just, you're under a whole different set of rules, which nobody realizes till they're in, I don't think. But
Now, you mentioned something that you were a veterans counselor after the war. What else did you do after the war?
after the war, after I got out of the Navy and came home, I tried a bunch of things, but it was too quick to try these things. Like I had mentioned, I do fairly well on tests usually, and they to the Navy's credit, they set us up before we got out. They sent us they sent me from the beach jumper unit in Coronado to downtown San Diego to study for the post office test. And I aced the post office test. They give you the test right there, okay? So I aced the post office test, forgot about it, got out, Then when I got home, my father dragged me to a few places. He says, put in for the sanitation department. So I took a sanitation test. Again, this was a simple test. I think I got 100 on the test. I couldn't understand how anybody wouldn't get 100 on the test because the questions were pretty obviously easy. And then I worked for the United Parcel Service. I got that job right away. And it was too much because it was New York City. It wasn't real. I was a driver, and there was no driving. It was just insane. And it was I worked for them just after the training. I got a job with Con Ed, Consolidated Edison. Down there is like Niagara Mohawk, NIMO, meter reader. And I picked up on this very well. And they trained me in a nice place down in Chinatown in New York City. It was great. But then they wanted to station me in the South Bronx. I said, no, I'm not going to the South Bronx in a cellar armed with a flashlight to read people's meters. No, thank you. So then they called me for the post office. So I did work in the post office at that point as a clerk, carrier. But I really did not want to be a clerk. I wanted to be a carrier because they'd get you out of the place and you could just deliver the mail, do your job, and you still got to deal with the bureaucracy. But the clerk's job was terrible. You're just sitting there throwing letters into boxes by zip codes, and you had to remember. You had to do homework. You had to memorize the zip codes and all that. It's all different today, but it was terrible then, and it's still no good now. It's worse. So I didn't like that, but I lasted almost a year there, and then decided to go to college, and I got into college. So I was old when I got into college. I was already 21, 22, 23 or 24 when I got into college on Staten Island, and I moved to Staten Island. And had an apartment, which didn't work out. It was these other veterans. It was just crazy. And I had to go back to the Bronx, and I went to Lehman College, which was part of CUNY, City University in New York, and then went back to Staten Island again because I had it with the Bronx. And I wound up graduating from Richmond College, which is now called the College of Staten Island. I'm an alumni member, and I got a BA and a BS in '77. Plus I had the Staten Island Community College degree from, I think, '73. And the Staten Island Community College doesn't exist anymore because the Richmond College and the Staten Island College, the Richmond College and Staten Island Community College merged and became CUNY SUNY, and they called it CSI, College of Staten Island. So I got the first year they did that, which was '77. I got a CSI. And I didn't like it because it sounded like a tractor trailer school or something. CSI, what are you talking about? I joined Richmond College. Anyway, I got honors. I graduated with honors. Both colleges. So, and then after that, I bounced around. I did sandblasting, house painting, and for a while I was a cab driver very quickly for a short period. I drove a cab in the Bronx, a private cab, not a medallion cab, and I did a lot of stuff. And then I got, because I signed a petition to help Vietnam veterans get jobs, and I mentioned I was a disabled veteran, put DAV next to my name. I got called in for an interview with the state on Staten Island at the New York State Job Service, because they had a program for disabled veterans called the DVOP, Disabled Veterans Outreach Plan. And I was interviewed, and I had the right experience. I even worked for a carnival. I forgot to say, I worked for a carnival for a while. I used to put up Ferris wheels, take them apart, put them in a truck, take them somewhere else, merry-go-rounds, tilt-a-whirls, all this stuff. So I had done that. That was while I was in college, too. Between semesters, I did that for a season. But anyhow, the big job, which I got in '79, was, as I told you when we began speaking at this interview, was that it was 10 years to the day since I had gotten out of the service, which is ironic because it reminded me historically of the Iliad and the Odyssey, because it took Ulysses, better known as Odysseus in Greek, 10 years to get back from the Trojan War. And he found everything out of order. And it was like me. It took me 10 years after I got out to get my act together. So, like I said, you're a historian, so I'm the same way. I just put dates together and stuff sometimes. But anyhow, yeah. So that's how I did it. And I worked on Staten Island as an interviewer to get veterans jobs specifically from that date of 10 or 11 October of '79 until July 27th of '87, when I started upstate at this job as a veterans counselor, the state veterans counselor, and worked at that job, which was totally different than the other job. The other job was a very important job insofar as, hey, getting somebody a job is important, but that's the only benefit I dealt with. When I came upstate and got the job in Albany, I found I was working under very, very frugal people and totally different situation, and I had to get everybody every benefit I could think up. And it was a whole different scene, and I was doing tons of paperwork at every bureaucratic level there was. Tax exemptions through the locals, the different tax municipalities, the town hall here in Newtonville. I know all this stuff, and I was filing claims for disability. I was seeing Vietnam veterans, World War II veterans, even World War I veterans. I once went, when I first come up, there was like 6 or 7 of these guys left, and these guys were old then, in '87. The youngest one was like 89, and they were all old men. Some were 100. The guy, I give him a lift. I had an Irish name. I forget his name. He lived in Waterville. I give him a lift home, and he was all right. He was great. He was in good shape. He looked young. He didn't look 100. But I'm sure they were all gone now. I know they're gone because the last World War I veteran died not long ago.
Right.
So, but anyway, that's. So then I worked up until from '87 until August 31st of 9/11, of August 31st, '01. My mother was dying, and I had to take care of my mother, and I was sick too. It was a tough situation. And then 9/11 hit, and my God, it was all changed since then. So much has happened, and but that's it. That was my career, and I still do it. I still talk to veterans and advise them. You know, for no compensation. I just still do this, and I'm a volunteer, a backup driver at the Beltrone Center. I'm the president of the board of directors at Capital District Center for Independence, which has helped me over the years with my daughter, who was born with multiple disabilities, and my mother, who needed a handicap ramp. They had a ramps program. I went through VESID and all this other stuff. So I'm active. I'm never without things to do. I'm always busy, and I really had to retire at the time I did. I was just so. My PTSD had gotten terrible because every time I had to file another claim, it was like reliving the whole thing again. And they had sold the armory where I worked in Albany. You know, the New Scotland Avenue Armory? They sold that in '99. Not a very wise decision by former Governor Pataki because of the Gulf War. I mean, you know, why sell armories? Not too wise. But anyway, they sold the armory, and that's where I was working. I had a free space in there because, again, these people are very frugal. They're always looking for a freebie, the Division of Veterans Affairs. And I wound up in Malta. Now, Malta, compared to Albany, was like, you know, I mean, I got deer running by in the morning when I'm going. It was strange. And I wasn't, you know, I did a good job there, but the guy I was working with was the deputy director for the region. I'd never been in that situation before. I was always the top guy in the office, except for the first few years, you know. That was all right, though. He was a good man. Dave Wallingford was this guy's name. He's retired now, too. And he was in Vietnam. He was a Marine officer in Vietnam. So be it.
Now, is there anything else you would like to add onto this interview?
Anything else I'd like to add? Well, I would like to just simply say that I'm very pleased with the way things have changed with the public. Finally realizing, and for a while now, realizing that, you know, we were good soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, and that we were only doing what all the other veterans before us ever did, GIs ever did, was trying to do what's right. And we went there to help those people, even if they didn't want our help. They say, blame the war, not the warrior. And that is so true. And I just hope that this new crop of veterans who are going through this terrible war, this Gulf War, Afghanistan, Middle East, the whole place is like constantly seems to be in turmoil right now. You never know where they're going to send the guys and gals next. I just hope that they can get their benefits when they come home, because unfortunately they forget very quickly what you've done for them, and there's always budget constraints and all this other stuff, and they don't like to pay the benefits, so you got to fight for anything you get. And I'm a little proud of the fact that as Vietnam veterans, we didn't let them get away. We made them give us our benefits. And I hope that everybody comes back in one piece, and that those of us here who are veterans of any wartime, peacetime period or anything, you know, continue as long as we can in good health and with a little pride knowing we did a good job. That's about it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for sharing your stories and experiences.
Well, thank you, Mr. Weaver. Thank you for having me.
Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel,